or not, does indeed seem to run the world. And yet we understand so little about money and the way that it really works. We have a very basic notion of how we think it works. But when you start to look under the surface, you find so much more going on. So Simon, a.k.a. The Spaniard, which I'm sure he will explain, if not read your programs, comes from the film Gladiator, was himself a banker. He was there in the big bad world of money. But then when the crash came, the credit crunch, suddenly Simon saw another side to it and basically stepped outside and is now trying to help people understand what's really going on here. What is money really about? And I think this is something crucial to address. Fantastic that he's here. So please, a big hand for Simon the Spaniard.
Population of the world. Only about 1% of us survive. Are you going to save us, Mr. Cole? How can I save you? This already happened. I can't save you. Nobody can. I'm simply trying to gather information to help the people in the present trace the path of the virus.
I grab the mic and start dropping topics. It's the art for dodger robbing pockets. The forgotten prophet, spitting the lost logic. Got a short fuse similar to bottle rockets.
Right. Hello, everyone. I am the Spaniard. I am. Okay. Obviously, the music was there to make me look good. And from this point on, the presentation goes downhill. Right. Okay, money. Money, 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 money. I've got a Bank of England note in my hand, and if anyone can remember what it actually says on the note, I'll read it for you anyway. It says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £20. And that's money, right? No. No. This is not money. This is evidence of a debt from the Bank of England to you, the people. Because the Bank of England, when they issued this note, promised to pay you. So a few questions. Number one, if I hand over a promise to pay, which is this note, to, let's say, the barmaid, well, how can I pay for anything with a promise to pay? Does that mean that if I promise to mow your lawn, that I just mowed it? So, how do I pay with a promise to pay? Right, okay, let me run you through something, all right? I want you to imagine that there is no thing called government, there is no thing called society as such. We're not working together, which we're really not working together. But let's pretend that we're not working together, and at some point in time, we all come together and we make the decision that we want this thing called government. We want all the mundane, boring jobs to be carried out by some central office, if you like, while the rest of us can get on and do the important things, right? Progress, yeah? Okay, so there's no money in circulation. So we get together, we get these people in as government, and the government decides that it's got to put some infrastructure across the land. All right, schools, roads, sewers, all that kind of jazz. So someone from government picks up the phone to someone at Treasury picks up the phone to the Bank of England and says, hey guys, we need to borrow £100 million worth of these notes. All right, we've got to do some work. And the Bank of England says, yeah, well, that's no problem. We'll gladly do that for you. All we ask is that when you pay it back, you pay back the measly interest rate of 1%. Just one. I'm not greedy. Just one. Now, government thinks that that's a fantastic idea. Great deal. Great deal. So they give the instruction to take the loan out, right? The Bank of England presses a button on a printing press, and normal paper goes through a printing press, and added to that piece of paper is a fantastic work of art. And it really is a great work of art. All right? But ultimately, we're then left with £100 million worth of these bits of paper with lovely designs on, lots of different denominations, and that £100 million is passed over to government. Now, government then spends that into the economy, and schools get built, roads get built, sewers get built. Everyone's really happy. Electricians get paid, the builders get paid, the accountants get paid, everyone gets paid. And the £100 million worth of these notes, which is the only money in circulation, and I say money using the term loosely, the only money in circulation, these notes are passing around. Now, slowly but surely, over time, the government collects all these notes back in the form of taxation. And once the government has got its £100 million worth of these notes back, it sends the £100 million over to the Bank of England and says, we want to pay you off. Right? We're paying it off. The Bank of England says, thanks very much. Now, where's the 1% interest? Well, where's it coming from? The only notes that were in circulation, we've just sent back to the Bank of England. So where are the notes coming from to pay back the 1% interest? Well, you ain't got any, have you? So you're going to have to give something else up, right? You're going to have to give up something else to satisfy the demands of the banker. So what else are you going to give up? Well, you've got a few options. You can give up property, real asset, all right? Or you can go to a foreign land, rape and pillage their resources and bring their resources, because that additional value can then come over to the country and fulfill that 1% payback. Or alternatively, we can take the future energy and labor of the people, and that can be used to pay it back. Or you could take out another loan and use some of the notes to pay back the interest from the first loan, but then that leaves you short on the capital and interest on the second loan. And so you're in a never-ending cycle. Do you get that? Right, okay. But let me ask you another question. Why is it that the Bank of England, which is basically a corporation, it's an idea, people came together and they gave their little discussion group, their little association, they gave it a name. They called it the Bank of England. So the Bank of England doesn't actually exist. It can't come and shake your hand or buy you a beer. It's just a concept. So why is it that this concept that does not exist in reality can promise to pay us? You're not even trusted with the actual money, right? You're not trusted with it. So they'll promise to pay you, but when you pay it back, you have to go out to work. In any other language, that's called slavery. You are a slave. Kind of leads into the, how I got the name, or how I came up with it. I was a general manager after the banking stint of however many years, I went into mortgage broking. God, I stitched up some people, I can tell you. Well, at least I now know that I stitched up some people. I didn't know it at the time, but I now know that I stitched up some people. And, it just, well, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? It's just ridiculous. So, ultimately, just so that you know, I actually attempted to turn myself in to the police, just as a side caveat, for fraud. Here's an interesting one. The copper said to me, he said, "Did you know what you were doing at the time?" And I said, "No. I've only just recently found it out." And he said, "Well, I can't prosecute you then. You didn't know. You didn't have the intention." Right? Now, intention is the mens rea. Right? Criminal intent, naughty intent. So, when we are paying these things back, we call it payment, don't we? Payment? Payment. So are you actually paying anything using these things, or are you just paying it in your head? Because the ment derives from mente, derives from mens, which means of the mind. So in your mind, you're paying for something, but you're not actually. You're not actually paying for anything. All right? Now, you go to Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and under the word blackmail, it says something along the lines of demanding rent and rates in anything other than silver. In other words, if you demand rent and rates to be payable in things like labor or grain, that is called blackmail. And it's funny that that blackmail comes mostly from corporations. And if you check out corporations, you'll find that their words or the title of the corporation is written in black ink. Most of the time, government agencies and corporations will ask you to actually put everything in black ink, block capitals on your paperwork. Blackmail. Whereas white male was demanding payment for rent and rates in silver. And that's called £20 sterling, right? Yeah? So, we're at a situation where this fictional concept called the Bank of England promises to pay us, but in order to pay it back, we have to go out to work. So, back to these notes. This is evidence of a debt. It's a debt instrument. Now, in commercial terms, because commerce is that law form which actually governs things like money, banking, and insurance. All right? It's the law of the sea. Current in the sea, current sea. Right? It is the law of the sea. So whenever you are engaging in any commercial transaction which involves money, you are being governed by the law of the sea, even though you dwell upon the land. All right? That's a whole different ballgame. Yeah? So, this is a promise to pay. This is a promissory note. But in legal land, all right, this is known as legal tender. So if you go onto the Bank of England's website, you'll see the definition which applies to Bank of England note and coin is legal tender. Everything else is currency. That's how they define it. Everything else is currency. Now, of course, in the sea, you've got waves, all right? You've got waves, and currency comes in many different forms, all right? You've got knowledge, which is often referred to or synonymous with light. Light travels in waves. You can sell your knowledge, all right? It's worth currency. You can sell your labor, your energy. All right? That's currency, going out and doing stuff. Yeah? So, this is a promissory note, a promise to pay. Now, upon this note, you'll find the signature of a guy called Andrew Bailey. He's chief cashier to the governor and company of the Bank of England. So if that's a promise to pay, and when you go to the bank and deposit, say, £20 into your bank current account, right, your current account, the cashier behind the till will tap some keys on a computer system, and on the credit side, so as you're looking at it, on the credit side of your account will appear the amount of £20. Now, at a later date, you might go and withdraw that £20, spend it on something, but you don't have to pay it back, do you, with interest? Because that was your credit entry, right? Am I right? Okay. Now, that's a promise to pay, right? I'm going to keep emphasizing this. That's a promise to pay, and that's treated as cash, right? I've got another promise to pay. I made it earlier, and I've got many people to sign these things. I've headed it up as a credit agreement, all right? It's a credit agreement for £10,000. And the moment that John Smith signed this credit agreement, did he promise to pay it back? It's a loan. Did he promise to pay it back? Yeah, right? So that's a promise to pay from an entity that doesn't exist. And if you go back to that entity and ask it to pay you, it gives you another promise. And that's treated as cash. That's a promise to pay. 15 minutes, by the way. That's a promise to pay, right? But you think it's a debt. So if this is treated as cash, as a promise to pay, what do you think this really is once you apply your signature and promise to pay it back? Absolutely. So who is loaning who the money? Banks love me. No, they don't. My mortgage company has not spoken. Well, they do speak to me, but they don't like it. Let's put it this way. I haven't really properly paid the mortgage for about 2 years. They do not want to talk to me. I've got a good few other accounts, because when I found this out, obviously I was studying quite hard, you know. I mean, just to recap, you know, I was a banker. 1987 I started. I know I look 21, but I'm not. So 1987, started off at the Queen's Bank, Coots. Had the frock coat, the whole full works. Wasn't going to go anywhere because I was too kind of East London background to go anywhere in that bank. Moved into American retail banking, became a manager, went into the finance broking, became a general manager, and of course back to the Spaniard caveat thing. You know, the general manager who realized he was a commercial slave, who trained up to become a gladiator and then defied Caesar, namely the banks. So I like to play with that. Hey presto, the Spaniard. Right? That's where I got it from. Right, so this is the score. We sign this credit agreement, we go to the bank, we hand it to the cashier or to a member of staff, they tap some keys, and a credit of £10,000 appears on an account on the credit side, ready for you to spend. Right, ready for you to spend. The difference is, this time, that because they've changed the words, right? Because all accounts work in exactly the same way. They all operate double entry off the back of double entry accounting, which is recorded on a T-bar. And I do that for a reason. I do that for a reason, because that's where the fundamental principles of commercial maritime law originate. Roman canon law. T-bar. Right? And what we always want in commerce is a balancing effect, because debt in commerce is sin. It's commercial sin to be in debt. Right? And livery, or to live, or living, is to engage in commercial activity, because your livery is your strap line to attract custom and business. So we are living in sin. We're handling debt instruments rather than money. So I refer to this as negative currency. Just makes it nice and easy. This is negative currency, whereas your energy, your labor, your ideas, your knowledge is positive currency. That's the way I like to think of it, right? So we're at the situation where we've got the T-bar, and all they've done is change the word from current or savings account to loan account. And because you're so well conditioned, you now think the bank loaned you something and that you have to pay it back. So when you spend the £10,000 that's sitting on the credit side of your account, you go out to work, all right? You pay it back, and if you don't pay it back, you might lose some property, or you might get taken to court and lose some income, all right? But if you do pay it back, and that's all over and done with, the bank does not give you this note back. And it is called a note, by the way. All right? So this credit agreement is a promise to pay. It may say credit agreement, but an agreement or a promise to pay is a promise to pay. You're promising to do something. All right? So the bank never gives this back to you when you've paid it off. But this is not only a note, but it's negotiable, because unless it bears the words non-negotiable, then it's negotiable, because you can buy and sell anything in this planet. So that's negotiable. So why do you think the bank does not give it back to you? Because they sold it. They negotiated it, right? Now, what did they negotiate it for? Well, they negotiated it for another currency in the form of electronic digits, right? The electronic digits only exist on computer land. You can't put them in your hand. You can't touch them. They only exist on the computer, right? But it's still a currency because people can use those computer digits to go out and obtain real asset and real things, right? But while it's in the banking system, it doesn't actually exist. It does not exist. Yeah? So, we've got this thing called a note, short for promissory note. It is negotiable, all right? But looking at the promise, if someone promises to do something for you and you trust that they are going to fulfill that promise, you are now secure in the knowledge that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, which means that that promise is a security. And in commercial terms, a security is treated as cash for accounting purposes. And this is a security. It is. All right? You can see this. Consumer Credit Act 1974, Section 189, definition of the word security, and you'll see lots of different things, mortgage, lien, charge, note. Right? That's a security. So here's the deal. Let me just recap, because I like to repeat this again and again, because I'm going to try and program you, if I can. So let me get this straight. When I deposit this promise to pay, it goes onto the account, I get a credit entry, I can spend that credit entry into the system, and I don't have to pay it back. But when I deposit this promise to pay, which is actually backed by my energy, by my labour, okay, I get the £10,000 credit on the credit side of the ledger, I spend it, and then I have to pay it back with interest. But we know from the very first example I was talking about with the national debt and the Bank of England that the money to repay the interest element on this alleged loan was never created by the bank. They only create the nominal face value of the loan. So there is always, with all the loans going on, whether it's governmental, right, whether it's international stage, whether it's local, whether it's the local bank, whatever, every time a loan is granted, that currency goes out into the system, but there was never enough currency created to repay the interest element. And we wonder why we are attacking each other to get hold of these notes. Because there's not enough. There's not enough of it. Now, I'll tell you, the answer is in the game Monopoly. Sort of. Everyone played Monopoly? No. Who said no? Well, in the game of Monopoly, so I'm going to assume that you've all played it, and I'm going to assume that your mums and dads taught you how to play. Because I'm going to assume, and answer me honestly, other than those people that have heard this one from me before, but hands up, who knew that there were two sets of rules in the game of Monopoly? And I can't see any hands. One, sir. Well done, sir. Two. Okay, so 2 out of about 200. So, you're telling me you didn't know there were two sets of rules in the game of Monopoly? You know why you didn't know, don't you? Because you never read the rules. Simple. So, what can you find out when you start reading the rules of this game? Well, Bill of Exchange Act 1882, Section 20, deals with what's called inchoate instruments. That's incomplete instruments. And in that section of that Act of Parliament, which is not law, by the way, it's just an act. They want you to act in a certain way. Every act is called a chapter. It's almost like a story. It's not real, not law. But Section 20 of the Bill of Exchange Act 1882, which was cited as being one of the most, if not the most, important piece of legislation ever passed, so you should really pay attention to it. Section 20 deals with inchoate instruments, incomplete instruments, signature on a piece of blank paper. That piece of blank paper, once the signature's been applied, is now cash. You can have some fun in court with this stuff, I'm telling you. And up until fairly recently, there was a video of myself. It was called Once Upon a Time in Bankruptcy. It was an absolute classic video. Classic. And in that video, I was speaking to the to the lawyer acting for the Treasury solicitor, who was acting in turn for the official receiver. Because when I found this stuff out, I had to study, so I ran up and I had to support myself. The industry I'd been working in had just been decimated. So what else could I do? I'd found this out. I knew that the credit entries belonged to me. The bank's not loaning anything. So I used my credit cards to support myself. Right? And I took it up to the nice princely sum of about 120 grand. Thank you. And then I went like this. Now, of the 13 accounts that I'd been dealing with, 9, I was learning at this time, 9 bugged out after, varying periods of time between a few months to a year. 9 of them bugged out, right? And I was learning. It doesn't take me that long nowadays, right? Seriously. But the other 4 wanted to play, right? And ultimately, I haven't got enough time to bore you with the ins and outs, but I've had some real laughs. But ultimately, it got to a stage where I had so much paperwork going on that I thought, stuff this, I'm going to take it into bankruptcy, right? So I allowed, my person, which is not me, my person, to be taken into bankruptcy. And anyone that doesn't understand what I've just said there, if you visit the White Rabbit Trust YouTube channel, right, which is a very highly sought-after YouTube channel, you'll hopefully catch on with this word person and the implications. But I decided to take it into bankruptcy because I felt it would be easier to deal with all the credit issues and my endeavors to obtain these things back from the banks. Right? I'll explain the relevance in a second. And I allowed my person to be declared bankrupt. Nothing happened with the bankruptcy. In fact, the notes from the official receiver have actually got all over their screens. Anything to do with Master Spaniard is problematic. He's lost his his grasp on reality, right? He seems to think that money's not money. I don't think it, I know it, right? So the point being, I got discharged, or my person was discharged from bankruptcy a year later. Nothing had happened, right? Lost nothing. And having obtained those notes from the official receiver, all right, there were a few other notes which effectively backed up what I'm going to be telling you in a second. And when I saw those notes backing up what I'd been saying, I just thought, this is ridiculous, right? This is absolutely ridiculous. So a year and 3 months after the bankruptcy was discharged, I reopened it. Now, you might think that's foolish. Kind of was from a work perspective and how much work I had to do, but it was quite fun. And so I was compelling, this is what I was doing, I was compelling the official receiver to go back to all the creditors that had put in their claims against me, and I wanted him to retrieve my currency, my note, the security that I'd lodged with the bank. These things. You see, when I'm talking to you, if you're brand new to this, you're going to have a lot of difficulty understanding that a piece of paper could potentially have value. Am I right? Okay, that's called a security, yeah? It's called a security. Let me give you something more recognizable. And this is about just as real as the stuff at the Bank of England, probably. And this ain't real, right? It's a money box. So, okay, let's say that I obtain a loan facility for £10,000, right? But this is the security that I put down for it, right? So I give it to the banker. He credits my account with £10,000. I go out and spend it. I pay it all back over the period of 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. Gets to the end, and the banker says, you're not having that security back. We've sold it. It's ours. What would you say to that? Sounds like theft to me. That's exactly what it is. The problem is you just didn't understand that in a commercial world, which runs pretty much like the game of Monopoly, because the guy on the front of that box is allegedly J.P. Morgan, and it does kind of look like him, right? So The point being, because you don't actually recognize this as having value in that game, and it is a game, and I treat it as a game, you never go back for these things. But when I was working for the banks, getting into this stuff, thinking back with the benefit of hindsight, we used to give these things back to people, back to customers when they paid their loans off. And we used to call the figures to pay off the loan a redemption figure. Because to redeem is to buy back. Right? But if you can't redeem this promise, that means it's still out there somewhere. And who is to say that the bank at some point in future is not going to come knocking on your door with a big burly bailiff or something, demanding that you pay it again? Now, you think that could never happen, right? You know what I'm going to say. It has happened. It has happened. And when you try and speak to, the Neanderthal that turns up, I don't mean it horribly, but when they get that uniform on, they do turn into a Neanderthal. But when that Neanderthal turns up to collect the money, he's not going to listen to a word you say, right? He's just going to want to take something away, yeah? So anyway, what I was trying to do was to get the official receiver to go and collect my notes, my securities, because it's my signature on there, so it belongs to me. Incidentally, we don't redeem notes nowadays, you settle accounts. And to settle means to give away. So when you settle an account, you're giving it away. Incidentally, ever noticed the way it says repayments? Not payments, not £10,000 loan, 60 payments of £200, sir. No, it's 60 repayments of £200. Why do you think it's got the re bit in front of the payments? Because the moment you deposited the note, you already paid it. So when you go out to work and pay back the monthly installments, you're repaying it. You're repeating the process of paying it. And if you settle up halfway through, well, then you're giving it away. Have it, to the bankers. I mean, they need it. They do need the donations. We'll have a pot going around later, yeah? All right, so the point being, I wanted the official receiver to go and do his job, because his job is to collect all the assets into what's an allegedly bankrupt estate and settle up all the creditors. It just so happened in this bankruptcy that I knew I was the creditor. The official receiver didn't like it. I've had a few run-ins with this bloke. He didn't like it. So anyway, comes down to January last year, and I reopened the bankruptcy, attempting to compel the official receiver to go and do his job. And incidentally, he actually specified on my notes that I had the right to this. It's called set-off. If the bank owes me the 10 grand note and I owe the bank 3 grand, rather than pass 2 transactions, we set it off and the difference moves in one transaction. So in other words, they would owe me 7 grand. Because yes, ladies and gents, guess what? If they can't produce this note, what do they owe you? £10,000. At least £10,000. You could potentially argue, if you know what you're doing, that everything they created off the back of this, as derivatives and future trading, betting, and so on and so forth, also belongs to you. And that will total millions, because of every single loan facility, the bank makes millions. That's all right, I forgive you. Right? The bank makes millions. Yeah? But you don't get to see any of it. And when it comes to settling up, they want you to pay them, but you ain't going to get this back. You've got to take them to court to get this back. And even then, you're going to find it hard. Because having attempted to compel the official receiver to go collect my notes and offset it against what the banks claimed I owed them, the note appeared on my file. There's no point attempting to collect anything from the banks, because if there is anything owed to Master Spaniard, we don't think it's going to be a lot. So they never asked the question. They didn't even bother. And as far as I'm concerned, I went into that bankruptcy knowing that they owed me. Right? So, after I'd issued this motion to compel the official receiver to go collect, okay? We had a court hearing, highly hilarious. I had 20 witnesses come down to watch the show, and it is a show in court. It's all about the show time. And I'd previously sent off a 34-page statutory declaration, taking all the words from the dictionaries, the judicial dictionaries, Acts of Parliament, to prove, using their words, to prove that that is cash, that it was negotiable, that it is a note, that it is a promise to pay, and that for accounting purposes it's treated as cash, because when Lord Denning was Master of the Rolls at the Court of Appeal, 1969, I think, Salim Najjar case, and he said, this court has repeatedly stated that a promissory note or a bill of exchange is to be treated as cash for accounting purposes. Lord Denning. Right? So you got it. Incidentally, all that information is first-year economics syllabus. All right? So if you've done an economics degree, you're likely to know this. But if you haven't, and if you don't work for the Bank of England or any other central bank, and if you're not high enough up in any other normal banks, you're probably not going to know. And we don't get taught at school. So we had this hearing. All right? 34-page statutory declaration, sent it off to every senior bod I could think of. British Bankers Association, FOS, FSA, FCA, as it is now, Vince Cable, Attorney General, Solicitor General, every police commissioner, every police and crime commissioner, every police chief, you name it, they got it. And I asked them to verify if I was wrong. Not one response. Not one. So I know I'm right. I'm always right. So I told my ex. Anyway, but I was still right, yeah? So, turned up for this court case. And so I'm up against the official receiver who employs the Treasury solicitor to act on their behalf, who had employed a lawyer called Andrew, who had employed a barrister called Matthew, right? And Andrew and Matthew came empty-handed, and as far as the judge was concerned, who hadn't read my paperwork, so she claimed, who didn't understand it, so she claimed, kicked it out. Without merit, totally vexatious. She couldn't rebut it, but totally vexatious. Struck it out. And then she said, well, Master Spaniard, you're going to, have we discussed the issue of costs? You're going to have to pay their costs. Now, I've been in court quite a few times, right? And this is what I normally do when someone says that I've just lost and I've got to pay the costs, right? If I don't invite them to increase the costs because I think they've done a great job, then I just say, I pull out my pen and I say, well, I'll accept any costs you got. So, this guy Andrew standing there, and he passes me this fee schedule, right, with his costs on it. So I took the fee schedule while the judge is still talking. Incidentally, the clerk had been laughing the whole way through, which was quite good because it made my jokes look good. But I took this pen and I literally just wrote on it, accepted for value, right? Exempt from levy, exemption ID, signed it and dated it, and I handed it back because I just turned it into cash, right? By signing it. So I'm in the court and the judge is still going, and I handed it back to Andrew, and he took it. Now, the moment he's taken it, that's paid. Thank you. I hope we got that. Claps. So the moment he's accepted it. So the judge then says, well, Master Spaniard, you're going to have to pay $4,500 costs. I said, I just paid it. So he says, Master Spaniard, he goes, you're going to have to pay in something other than a signature. And I leant over to him and said, you're going to be waiting a very long time. Right? Now, after that, he'd sent out a letter saying that he wanted me to pay it again. Right? I mean, how many times do you want me to pay these things? Yeah. So I phoned him up, right, and I filmed it, and I put it on the internet. Well, it was funny at the time, right? It was funny at the time. Anyway, it became a hit. Well, relative for my kind of number of hits on YouTube, but it zoomed up to about 8,000 very, very quickly. And the whole video was along the lines of me playing word games with Andrew from the Treasury Solicitor's office. Because, I was saying to him, well, how do you want me to pay? And he said, well, I want, these things. I said, oh, you want me to promise to pay? I said, I promise to pay you. No problem. How much do you want? And, of course, he was getting a bit irate. Master Spaniard, right? You've got to give us something that the bank can accept and honour and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. Anyway, we kind of left it. I'd had a good laugh. I'd entertained myself, which is really the whole purpose of my videos, to entertain myself. And if you lot get entertained, well, that's a happy byproduct, right? So, 9 months went by. He sent the instrument back to me. So the moment he sent that back to me, that signature that I'd given him, he discharged the debt in commercial terms, right? Now, of course, it doesn't mean he's going to stop trying it on, right? I mean, as the ladies will know, you can tell a guy no, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to stop trying it on, right? So Andrew's still trying it on, yeah, and he sent this letter trying to convince me and sell it to me that I don't understand what's going on here and that I've got to go out to work and pay him, right? But again, even if I do get these things, how can I pay him? It's a promise to pay. It's blackmail. So anyway, he sent the thing back to me, which discharged it, and I just literally forwarded it onto the court, which is what I normally do, and these things normally disappear. I've never been chased once for costs, and I've had a lot of court cases, right? But I've never been chased until that moment. Anyway, it all went quiet, which is exactly what normally happens. And I was thinking, great, usual kind of story. 16th of December came along last year, and I got a nice little interim charging order through on the property. Knew nothing about it, right? They didn't warn me. They decided to just go for a charging order. Oh, God, just before Christmas. It's just like, oh, dear, I don't know. So anyway, for those of you that are familiar with it, I'd just come across some of the court... Well, I say just come across. I'd heard about Court of Record previously, right? And I really decided to get into it. There's a guy that came on and pointed out one or two issues with our language and the language that we're using, because, of course, the language that we use currently is not actual proper English. Excuse the French, but we use a commercialised, bastardised form of the English language. You have to go back to before Shakespearean times to actually get anywhere close to the kind of beautiful language that we actually have. Yeah? Which isn't, you can't really say it's English. I mean, it's a mixture of loads of different things. But Shakespeare makes it sound very beautiful. All right? And ultimately, I had 3 hearings this year, January, March, and April. All right? Now, with the Court of Record, what you have to understand, it goes a bit off tangent, but I've got to get this one out, because this is a bit of power for you lot. Whose head is on the note? Queen's head, right? If indeed she is the Queen. But let's pretend for a moment that she is. Right? So... So, let's just pretend for a moment that she is. Right? So you've got the Queen, the King or the Queen is always supposed to be at one with the people, so the story goes. So, at a ground level, who are the eyes and ears of the Queen? Yeah, us lot, right? Because if the Queen's, in London or whatever, and, going back before, electronic communication and stuff like that, who's going to alert her if there's some foreign invading force landed up at Dover or something? Well, it's down to the people that are down there, right? Get the word out, we're the eyes and ears. But each of you have forgotten that you've got a crown on your head. Have you not? From the moment you came here, you had a crown on your head. In fact, unless you breached the contract, you arrived or emerged in a state of emergency, crown first, right? And if you decided to come out the other way, that's a breach of contract. Or was it a breach of trust? I don't know. Right? So, the way I look at it is that when I'm walking around, I am the Queen. I have been to Brighton and been mistaken for a queen. I've got nothing against that. I've got no problem with that. But I'm not a queen, but I am the Queen or the King, because I've got a crown, and I am the eyes and ears not only of the country, but I am the eyes and ears of the universe. Right? And I'm transmitting, receiving all the time, just like you lot are. So I can see what's going on. Messages are being sent out everywhere, just like ET phone home. Brilliant. Right? So that's the way that this court of record works. You see, you've got to understand you've got so much power that you are not using. So this is how this court thing went about, right? Because I just want to prove to you that you can actually win this stuff, yeah? So, using proper English, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I'm going to let you go and research some of that. But using proper English, I sent some paperwork into the judge. Now, initially, over these 3 hearings, right, what you've got to understand is that 3 is a magic number. And from a judge's perspective, this is the way it goes down, because it's all based on your actions. Remember, communication, 80% of communication is non-verbal. So when we're attempting to communicate by the spoken word or the written word, we're using the smallest facet of communication to attempt to communicate. The biggest facet is the non-verbal stuff, where you can see me, you can resonate with me, you see my vibe, you see my expressions, and you see whether I'm angry or not. Yeah? So the show that goes on in court, or should I say before your court, is all important. And there were 3 hearings. Now, the first time, when you act in a certain way, it could just be an accident. So when something happens once, it could just be an accident. When something happens twice, it could be a coincidence. But when something happens 3 times, it's a pattern. 3 is a magic number. I'm not singing it. De La Soul, back to the 80s, right? Where's Jason? So 3 is a magic number, Trinity, right? So at the first hearing, I'd used some of this proper English language, and the other side hadn't turned up. And I want this charging order discharged, right? So you can't pay anything. You can settle stuff and give stuff away, yeah? They won't allow you to redeem it. You've got to discharge it, right? You've got to discharge it. So I'd gone in, and the judge was a bit flustered, and I let him off the hook by demanding an adjournment. So he adjourned it. We came in the second time, and I'd sent some more paperwork off. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling rank on the judge using proper English. I'm not using their private society, legal society. I'm not using the legal lingo. To me, legal language, if it's 2 people working for corporations and they're talking, they might as well be talking Russian. You don't understand what they're saying because it's legalese, not English. Sounds like English, right? The sentences that are constructed, they look like English, they look like professional English, but they're not English. It's a private society's language. That private society operates out of the City of London. Foreign jurisdiction, for anyone that wasn't aware. It's not part of the UK. And neither am I, because the UK is a corporation. And I can't exist inside a corporation. And neither can you. You might think you can, but you can't. So, I'd gone there for the second hearing, and while they were speaking, I was kind of looking, at other stuff. But based on what I'd sent the judge tore the hell out of this guy. That's how I knew it was working. Because the moment I sat down, the judge attacked the other side. And he demanded that the other side do certain things, and off we went again for another adjournment. And then we came back to the third hearing, right? Now, remember, I mentioned to you that the Bank of England is a corporation, it's a concept, it's an idea, it doesn't actually exist in reality. You with me? So you can't go meet McDonald's, you can't go meet Marks and Spencer's, you can't go meet ICI, British Telecom, or any of the other ones because they don't exist. They are just a certificate of incorporation bearing the name. Yeah? So, what Andrew had done, whenever members of staff sign on behalf of a corporation, they're signing for the company because the company can't sign jack itself. So people are making the decisions for the company, right? So Andrew had made the great mistake of signing the fee schedule with the words Treasury Solicitor. Now, Sir Paul Jenkins holds the office of Treasury Solicitor, but he's not actually the Treasury Solicitor because he's Paul Jenkins. Right? So, we go in for the third hearing. And again, I'm looking out the window because I'm expecting the judge to attack this bloke. And he did. It was great. Bang on cue, he attacks this guy. And I'd required of the judge that he dismiss the claim and discharge the order. And the judge got to the end of what he was saying. I'm still looking out the window at this time. And he says to Andrew, he goes, well, I'm of the mind to strike out the claim and discharge the order. And I'm hearing it, and I'm thinking, cool, I've done it. I'm going to win here. And then he turned around and said, what do you think, Master Spaniard? Now, I ignored it, because he's speaking Russian. I don't understand. Master Spaniard. So I look around, and I look at Andrew. I'm not looking at the judge. I'm looking at Andrew. And then he starts saying, Master Spaniard. And they're both going, Master Spaniard, Master Spaniard. And I just went, guys, I do not understand a word you're saying. I then took the fee schedule and I turned to Andrew and I said, who signed that? And he said, well, I did. And I said, yes, but you're a man, Andrew. Right? So the judge knew exactly where I was going because I want Treasury solicitor to turn up. It's just an office. He can't turn up, can he? He doesn't exist. As soon as I went like that, the judge went, right, just like a boxing match, right, stop it. I'm striking this out and discharging the order. Discharging the charging order, right? So I won. Thanks. I won. How much time have we got? 6 minutes, right, cool. I just want to jump onto something really important. So the point being, when you put in a bit of practice, because just like riding a bike, you are going to fall off, you're going to have some scrapes, you've got to understand that in order to learn, you've got to have setbacks, right? So don't look at it as failure, look at it as part of the learning curve, right, or the learning journey. You enjoy the setbacks, enjoy the failures, try and learn from it, try and disseminate yourself where you've gone wrong. But ultimately, you've got to believe that you've got a remedy. But all you've got to do is step up to the plate and do it. Because as far as I'm concerned, over here, there are two governments running side by side. You've got government, which means control of the mind. Govern, to control, mens of the mind, control of the mind, the clue's in the word, right? And that operates, as far as I'm concerned, on behalf of Her Majesty, which is a trading style of the City of London Corporation, operating out of a foreign jurisdiction, which is the City of London. It's not your government. You are your government. But you haven't stepped up to the plate to do it. So someone's made you an offer to tell you what to do, and we all accepted it. But every 4 years, you get the right to vote in a set of new people to tell you to do what you want them to tell you to do. Whereas I cut that out. I go straight for what I want to do, as long as I'm not causing harm. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. I'm just going to break down currency and law for you into very simplistic terms. That is a promise to pay. Right? So the promise to do something or the intention to do something is the currency. That's the currency. The expectation that someone's going to do it is the debt. And when you're talking about law, right, unopposed motion is the law. Because in a lawsuit, in a case, if I motion the court to do something and it's not opposed, the court moves. If I motion to do something and it's unopposed, the court moves. And when you get to the final judgment and you look back historically over what's happened, you'll see that a series of unopposed movements is the law. Therefore, for example, does anything stop the sun whizzing through space-time? No. So that's the law, right? Does anything stop this planet from spinning on its axis? No. So that's the law. So what is. All we got to do is change what is. That be the law. Right? That is the law. You can make your own law. Now, quick flick back. A bit 5 yet? Okay. So, quick flick back. I like to pick up old books from charity shops. I don't have much money. So I went to one of these book exchanges. Picked up this book of Tudor manuscripts from 1545. There was this particular document, and I'm reading through it. And it was talking about loans and usury. Now, this is the way a loan went down in Tudor times. If you needed some money, and I had loads spare that I wasn't using, you could ask me for a favour. And as a favour, I'd give you the money to go and use. But you pay me back when you can, and there's no interest charge. And I do that on the basis that at some point in future, I might need a favor from you. Now, I don't expect you to return the favor because you don't know what I'm going to ask yet, and I don't know what I need, and maybe you won't want to do it. But I hope that if I come to you, that you will repay the favor. All right? Now, the point being, just consider that if our currency was doing favors for people, because I've now got about 20 relationships where I know that if I ask someone to do something, they'll do it for me, and if they want me to do something for them, I'll do it for them. And but it started off as a one-for-one exchange kind of thing, but no money involved. But now it's just kind of got out of hand. There's no count going on. It's just if I need a favor, I phone the guys up. If they need a favor, they phone me up. And it's so much nicer doing favors for people. Right? There's no money. Right? This is a unit of measure so that we don't have to barter. It's a unit of measure, right? So just like on a ruler, if I want to measure how tall I am, I use a ruler. So the ruler, which contains the unit of measure, that is the ruler. That controls the whole transaction. That's a unit of measure. So he who controls that controls every commercial transaction in some way, shape, or form. You just don't see it. Yeah? You don't see it. Anyway, you've got the power. I'm going to finish up. Hope you enjoyed it. Anyone who wants to find out more, go onto the White Rabbit Trust YouTube channel and knock yourselves out. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, The Spaniard. Brilliant stuff.